Welcome to the Movie Potluck Podcast, the podcast where you never know what dish the guys are bringing to the party. Movie reviews of the films that might have slipped right off your plate and gotten snatched up by Grandma's mean old poodle. Behind the scenes info that might just have that secret ingredient you've been craving all day. Special guests, surprise interviews, a lot of laughs, and much, much more. Now, here's your host, Big Bear Joe and Bigger T.
What's up, yo? Big Bear Joe here with Big T in the Movie Potluck Podcast, the podcast where you have no idea what we're going to bring to the party, but it's all about movies. So
we're like those crazy church ladies.
Yeah.
You never know what's in that casserole dish.
Exactly. So, sometimes it just may be whatever's left in the cabinet.
That's right.
Today's movie is one of our favorite movies. We've discussed this movie many times, and we've both seen it quite a few times. And the Peanut Butter Falcon. So, Big T, you want to tell them a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah, man. I when we were talking about starting this podcast, we want to kind of focus on movies, maybe that not everybody's seen, maybe something that a lot of people have seen. This is one. There's quite a few have seen it, some haven't. Didn't get quite the publicity some got, but it's such a good movie. It's just a synopsis of it real quick. Shia LaBeouf is the main actor in it, with Dakota Johnson, Zach Gottsagen. Is that why I'm saying his last name right?
Yeah, I still haven't figured out how to pronounce his last name. So
he's one of the stars of it. And he's actually a young man that's got Down syndrome. And so this is one of the first starring roles for someone with Down syndrome. But the story is Zach is a Down syndrome individual who is a ward of the state. His parents aren't around. He's living in a nursing home. Dakota Johnson is the kind of the state representative that watches out for him and makes sure he's got all the things he needs and stuff like that and stays out of trouble. And he's a big wrestling fan, and he's wanting to get to his heroes wrestling camp school, the Saltwater Redneck. Okay. And so he's got this VCR tape that he watches every day of the Saltwater Redneck, which is played by Thomas Hayden Church, which wonderful actor from Wings and all the other stuff he's done in the past. But and so that kind of sets up Zach. Well, Shia LaBeouf is a young man has lost his brother, who he's very close to, doesn't really have family around either. And he's a fisherman. But through some of his bad choices, he's gotten himself in some trouble, and some people are after him. And so Zach ends up going on the run, trying to get to Saltwater Rednecks wrestling school. And Shia LaBeouf, who's Tyler, he goes on the run, trying to get away from the guys that he's made angry. And they end up running into each other. And you end up with kind of a Huck Finn type story. It's set up on the East Coast, kind of in the fishing waterways there. And they end up making their way toward Florida, staying under the radar and hiding. And they end up, Dakota Johnson's character, Eleanor, ends up connecting with them, and there's some travel there together. But it's just a real kind of a sort of a Huck Finn, sort of just a buddy tale, but also it's got a lot of heart to it. It's got some little bit of action here and there, but a lot of great messages in it, especially when dealing with people with so-called disabilities and things like that. There's a lot of good messages you can learn, that people can learn from that. Is that a pretty good synopsis, Joe? You think?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a movie that is definitely less about the goal and more about the journey. And it's very character driven. like we talked about, there's a little action, but it's a slower pace, and it's about the relationship between Tyler, Shia LaBeouf's character, and Zach. And it's like I said, it's been referred to as a Huck Finn kind of situation, comparable. But at the beginning, it doesn't really start like that. At the beginning, you're talking about two people that kind of worlds collide, and Zach wants to be with Tyler, but Tyler doesn't want to be with Zach.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, you go back to movies. I mean, it's taking it way back, but like a movie like The Defiant Ones with Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier, where they're handcuffed together, and they're, one's black, one's white, and they're kind of from different worlds, and they have to learn to get along. So basically the first half of the movie is Tyler kind of running from Zach. I don't want to have to deal with you. I've got my own stuff I got to deal with. Then halfway through the movie, it turns into that, oh, wait a second. Now we're buddies. We're together. And it gets emotional, at that point. And then it turns into that Huck Finn kind of movie, so, but it's,
and that's a very predictable route for it to take. But
right.
In this movie, you had to take that route. I mean, because it does. That's what gives it so much heart. Because like you just said, at the beginning, Tyler sees it that Zach needs him.
Right.
He's being the hero for Zach.
Right.
But when it gets toward the end, Tyler needs Zach, and needed Zach more than he ever knew that he needed a friend like him. And one of the neat things about this movie, and one of the reasons we wanted to do it, okay, and we can maybe get into this a little bit here before we come back to the kind of some specifics about the movie, is when you start reading and watching interviews and stuff about the background of this movie, that happened in real life for these people.
Right.
Like Zach taught them lessons, and they realized they needed Zach, the real guy, not just this. They named his character the same,
right?
But they realized this guy has so much to give, especially like a Shia LaBeouf and Dakota Johnson. When you see them interviewed with, and them talking about Zach, Shia LaBeouf was at a point in his life where he needed someone like Zach in his life. He had just been arrested, I believe. And, so he's coming to set, and he said he was expecting people to look at him judgmentally and things like that. And hear his co-star that he's spending the most time with greets him every day with a hug and I love you. And as he said, he said about Zach, he said he has no judgmental bone in his body,
Right.
And so to me, that's what makes it so great is they were experiencing that as they made the movie offset, and it was coming to life on set also.
Right.
But Joey, talk a little bit about why they made this movie.
Well, the two directors and the two writers, tell them what their names are.
Tyler Nielsen and Michael Schwartz.
Yeah, they were doing like an acting camp, and Zach, and I believe there was multiple people there that were in kind of in Zach's situation a little bit, and it was kind of like kind of introducing them to stuff and kind of basic stuff, and they could see in Zach his enthusiasm and his talent, and he was like, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this, and those two guys were like, well, there's not really any movies that you could really do. And then all of a sudden Zach was like, well, you go ahead and write one, y'all are writers, your directors, write one for me. And, and his enthusiasm, like you said, rubbed off on them, which is exactly what happens in the movie. You go from Tyler being jaded because of the death of his brother. He's trying to escape, but these bad guys. Zach's trying to escape his confinement. He's confined to a senior citizen home. Yeah. And he's trying to make his travel, and Tyler's trying to make his travel. And their worlds collide. And they're both running from something, and they end up running towards each other, and they both find out that what they're looking for, they find in each other instead of out there in the world.
Yeah.
And that's when it starts to get, go from, get away from me. I hate to make this analogy, but at first Tyler almost treats Zach as almost like a stray dog because he's got so much on his plate. He doesn't want to have somebody have to take care of.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're on your own. You can do it. You go. Until that point where he comes in contact, Tyler does, with Eleanor. And he kind of finds out that Zach is a quote unquote outlaw too. Yeah. He's running because Eleanor's searching for him because he's escaped the, senior citizen home. Yeah. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a little kinship. Oh, we're both outlaws, then they become kind of buddies, So yeah. That's why it was kind of referring it to some of those. And when I say something like the Defiant Ones, that's an old movie, but that's an old Hollywood trope of people getting chained together of different worlds and having to learn, we're not so different, or having to learn, it's about human relationships. It's not about your color. It's not about, whatever the differences, perceived differences are. And you start learning that, all of us human beings are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And you're forced in those situations. And even though technically Tyler's not forced to be with Zach, he really is, because you start seeing that Tyler getting kind of softer, and he kind of starts feeling responsible for Zach. At first he's like, yeah, you're on your own, buddy. And then, finally he's like, I think this guy kind of needs me. You know what I mean? Because
well, he especially gets defensive for Zach when Eleanor comes back around.
Right.
And gets with him, and he sees the way that she coddles him and treats him like he can't do anything.
Right.
And he says, look, don't treat him like he's got disability.
Right.
He's a human. He's a person.
He's 22 years old.
Treat him like he can do, because he can do a lot more than you're giving him credit for. And there's a lot of great lessons in that, I think, for anybody, in those kind of situations, especially if you've ever done any work at all with people with those similar type of in similar type of situations, disabilities like that.
Right.
And so to me that was a neat part of it. But kind of going back to how they got it started, they did a 10-minute sample video with Zach acting.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent it to actors that they thought they might could get. And so they sent it to Shia LaBeouf. They sent it to Dakota Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
They sent it to, what's his name? Saltwater Redneck, Thomas Church.
Yeah. Thomas
and all of them signed on.
Right.
Because of Zach.
Right.
Every one of them said, what in that 10-minute video got you?
Right.
And they said, Zach. We saw that he could act.
Right.
And
they saw that there was a light inside of him.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? They saw that through that. And when they met him in person, it was like, yeah, what we saw on screen was who he really is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was a light. And, we're talking about some major actors in a, low budget film, that I don't really know exactly who it was produced by or distributed by, but is
Roadside Attractions distributed.
Yeah, so quote unquote, it's quote unquote an independent like film, and all of a sudden you get, like I said, you get Shia LaBeouf, who's kind of trying to rehabilitate his reputation in Hollywood. You get Dakota Johnson, who's done some more risque stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's growing as an actress. She's wanting to expand into more, not just family friendly stuff, but more character driven stuff.
Something with a little heart to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Something a little heart to it. Something a little bit more soft. And then, you've got Thomas Hayden Church, who's been in stuff. It's, that's been very, he's been in like Oscar nominated things, and then you throw in somebody who's just plays a partial role in this movie, who's a legend, Bruce Dern.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who's, Zach's best friend who helps him escape. And you're like, Bruce Dern is like a Hollywood legend.
Yeah.
Comes from a Hollywood, family, you know what I mean? And you're sitting there, it's like all these worlds collide in a perfect way. And the cog of all this is Zach.
Yeah.
It's all because of Zach. So, you talk about like, it really comes through whenever Eleanor finally gets in their life, as far as Tyler showing that empathy and showing that protection for Zach. But it really starts earlier when the kid tries to make him dive off the thing. And Tyler says he can't swim. That right then, it's like he takes on that role of the big brother.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like a reversal, because he lost his big brother.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now he's the big brother. And it goes from like, almost like the big brother saying, "Oh, you're my little brother, get away from me," to leave my little brother alone. I'm sticking up for him now.
And who's that plays his big brother? Because they just do flashbacks.
John Bernthal from The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
He played Shane in The Walking Dead. He
Yeah.
was the
I was going to say he's a big actor. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the main adversary the first couple seasons to Rick's character. He was Rick's best friend, and Walking Dead, so people would recognize him. And also people will recognize. So basically, you've got a situation where you've got Shia LaBeouf's Tyler and Zach playing Zach are your two protagonists. Okay, they're trying to get to goals. Their goals are different, but they end up being the same. Yeah. Tyler's trying to get to Florida. Zach's trying to get to North Carolina to get to this.
And I think Tyler's just trying to get away.
Yeah. Well, he is, but when he pulls out the map and said, "I'm going to Florida," you look on here, where you're going, North Carolina is on the way. If you want to join me, you can, but this is how it's going to be. And your antagonist is played by John Hawkes, who people may remember is in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, plays the ex-husband of the main character. Can't remember her name. So he's been in a lot of things too. So he's, somewhat of a known actor.
Yeah.
So it's just this, it's all character driven. Like I said, there's a little bit of action, but it's all character driven, and it's about relationships, which are what the best movies are about. Yeah. And that's what we've talked about. That's why we like this movie, not just because of the backstory, not just because of Zach's situation, but because you literally see these characters grow, as characters, but you see those actors grow. You know that what's happening off scene is what you're seeing on screen. Yeah. Because that same emotion, that same tenderness, that same bonding is happening off screen is happening on screen. Yeah. And it just it's very heartfelt. And I think that's why it's one of those movies, even though it's not real action based, it's very easy to watch multiple times. Yeah. Because it's heartfelt. It's an arc of life is basically what it is. You think your life's going to go one direction, and it doesn't, and it goes a different direction, and it ends up being better than the direction you thought it was going to go. Yeah. And like I said, it's about the journey. It's not about the goal. It's not about the end. And we're not going to have any spoilers about what happens at the end, but that relationship between those three, Eleanor, Tyler, and Zach, it drives the entire movie. And those three could basically be sitting in a living room somewhere and not have anything else around, and still have that emotional bonding of what you see, in that movie, because that's real. It's just a reflection of, what's going on off screen. So
these writers did such a good job, because all the stuff you're bringing out is just a testament to how good of a job they did. Right. They haven't really done a whole lot else. They haven't done anything really since. But one of the things they did is they tailored this to Zach.
Right.
They said, okay, if we're going to let Zach do this, we need things that he likes, things that he's passionate about.
Right.
So he loved wrestling. So there's got to be something to do with wrestling.
Right.
And, and he ends up getting to act with Mick Foley and Jake the Snake Roberts. Okay. And that's part of it. And then, he likes to swim. So the whole thing is based in the water, around the water,
Right.
And then they said he likes to party. He likes to hang out with his friends and do different stuff and everything. And so they had a lot of scenes where they were goofing off on the beach, and, in the fields and doing different things, and that's where the heart comes in. And like you said, they were doing that off camera too. I'm telling you, if you watch this movie and you like it, which
Right.
I don't see how you wouldn't like it.
Right.
If you watch this movie, you like it, go to YouTube and start watching some of the interviews with the cast.
Right.
And listen to them talk about hanging out in the hotel room, playing board games together and stuff like that. And just, just the great times they had.
Yeah. In those interviews, you see that love.
Yeah.
You see that love in those interviews that they have on that screen. You know what I mean? And, there's very, there's not a whole lot of dialogue. It's more about, it's just it's slower paced, but there's these little moments that stick out to you. And to me, the first moment is that first night that Zach and Tyler spend together. Whenever Zach is talking about he's a bad guy, he wants to be he's going to be a bad guy, and Tyler's like, "Well, why are you a bad guy?" And he said, "Because my family abandoned me, so I'm a bad guy." So all of a sudden, you could see it in Tyler. It's just like all of a sudden that emotion starts hitting him because he's looking at himself as a bad guy. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that's that mirror reflection of it, And then he basically says, No, Zach, you're a good guy. You have a good heart. That's who you are. Be who you are. Don't try to be the bad guy. You know what I mean? Be your true self. Yeah. And that's when he asked Zach, he says, am I a good guy or a bad guy? And Zach's like, you're a good guy. Yeah. And from somebody like Zach, and if anybody's ever been around somebody like that, they're honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
For fault. So if Zach's seeing Tyler as a good guy, then all of a sudden Tyler kind of pulls back and goes, yes, I am kind of a good guy. And it's every one of these characters, the three main characters are all they're dealing with their own identity. Their identity based on what other people think of them, their identity about where they are in life, about some of the stuff that's happened to them, and it's just this evolution that you see from it's like I said, it's like there's this, it's I don't know the analogy to make, but we're talking about movie Potluck podcast. It's basically like you got these three ingredients, these three separate people that all of a sudden come together, and you're like, man, this is some good soup.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like it's only got three ingredients, but man, this is some good soup.
I didn't know putting all this in one pot would work, but it did.
Yeah, exactly. So and it's heartfelt, it's inspirational, it's you see, it's if people watch the movie with an open mind, they can see a little bit of themselves in one of these characters, not multiple characters.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They can see, they can reflect on their own life and say, maybe something happened where, somebody looked at me a certain way as this, or maybe there's something with me, that people look at me a certain way because I may have this limitation or, or whatever, or, and just, it's the learning of other people because, Tyler looks at Eleanor a certain way until she, on the raft there, when she says, you don't even know me. You don't know that I volunteer at this old folks home. You don't know that I sit here, and basically act as a hospice worker, and I'm the last person.
You find out she's got a past too, and there too.
Exactly.
And,
so it's like,
not to give anything away, but
it's this, it's this, don't judge a book by its cover. It's this, don't look at yourself in a negative way based on things that are in the past or things that may not be matter, that are surface things. Look inside the heart, you person you are, because they're all three good-hearted people. Yeah. But for some reason they're just, and that's the soup you get at the end. Yeah. You get that, chicken soup for the soul kind of thing, you know what I mean? Where you're like, oh, that was good. Let me have some more of that,
That's
so
right.
But that's the thing that guided us both to this movie.
Yeah.
And got us through it. And we've both watched it multiple times.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies where there's very few movies that I've seen that I'll watch a movie sometimes and I'll like it, but I'll be like, oh, I won't ever watch it again, maybe 10 years down the road. But this is one of the movies that when you watch it, you want to be like, hey, hey, so-and-so, I want to show you this movie. I want you to watch this movie, which is exactly why we're doing this right now.
That's why we picked it for the first podcast, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're like, you will get something in this movie. We want you to see this movie.
I work at a school, and I work with kids that are taking virtual classes. I'm a facilitator.
Right.
And last year I had a classroom full of kids, and they were through with their work, and I had a kid that was going to watch a movie, and he said, hey, suggest a movie for me to watch. And I was wondering, he was 15-year-old high school boy, and I was like, I wonder if a 15-year-old high school boy is going to like this movie. But I mean, the first one I thought of was Peanut Butter Falcon, because like you said, when someone asks you, tell me a good movie to watch, this is one of the first ones that comes to my mind.
Right.
And so I suggested it to him. I said, well, try this one. If you don't like it, just turn it off and watch something else. And he turned it on, and he came up after it was over to my desk and said, Mr. Johnson, that's one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Right.
And this is a 15-year-old, boy, just, right. But he loved it, so I think it speaks to anybody. I think, like you said, I mean, anybody can find something in it that it will just touch you, especially if you're paying attention,
right.
If you're going into it expecting, CGI and Marvel stuff, then this ain't the movie for you,
Right. And that's not the kind of movies we're going to bring to you.
No,
we're going to bring you movies that either you've heard of and you just didn't watch, or maybe you haven't heard of.
Yeah.
And movies that have flown on the radar, maybe movies that were only in limited releases, or maybe movies that, but it's movies that we feel like you should watch, and we feel like you'll get something positive out of it, and I kind of want to start talking about a little bit about the performances here, because we've both talked about how we're drawn. First of all, we live in the South, so we're kind of drawn to movies that are based in the South. That's just the way it is. But we have also talked about how we can tell when people who are faking being from the South. I can pick out a fake Southern accent in a heartbeat. Well, Shia LaBeouf didn't go that route. He didn't try to be over Southern. You know what I'm saying? He could have made it cartoonish. He was kind of basically himself, just kind of more reserved version of himself.
Yeah.
He didn't try to put on a fake accent. Dakota didn't try to put on a fake accent or anything like that. Like I said, it was nothing in that movie to distract you from the core message of that movie.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, when you're watching a movie and there's something that's just off, you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, that's just not off. And you lose track of the movie. There's nothing around it that takes distraction from it. And that's why it's so good. There's not all of a sudden you turn around and there's a car jumping a bridge or something like that, or there's not, anything like that. It's like you're in the moment because you feel like, you're on that trip with them, and it's, like I said, it's about the journey. It's not about the end, and
there's not one actor that it was cringeable in this at all. No. There's not one.
And there's
not you could
one
really
actor,
critique much.
Exactly. And there's not one actor that comes across as not being genuine.
No.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's cast really, really well, even the supporting cast. And, because like I said, one of the biggest dangers of some of these movies is, this is a movie centered around a young man with Down syndrome. So we're going to have to just really either do something where we can really sell this movie, because it's an unusual movie that, like you said before, it's the first time, a young man with Down syndrome has ever been the star of a movie. So the danger is, let's do something to oversell it. Let's create some kind of big, action scene or a shoot 'em up scene or something.
Yeah.
They didn't do that, or there's this danger of all the characters kind of like, all being, coddling him or being, parents and stuff, or being, look at us, we're good people. We're accepting him as one of our own. No, it's organic. You know what I mean? It's natural. There's nowhere in the movie where you're questioning what you're seeing on the screen.
No.
You know, it's almost like a well-acted documentary in some ways. You know what I'm saying? That's how good it's done. And that's why, you know, I've been able to watch it multiple times. And that's why I'm like you said, I mean, that's why I'm like, hey, you need to watch this movie. You need to watch this movie. You need to watch this movie. You know? So, I mean, and that's the kind of movies we're drawn to, you know, just, you know, that have messages, that are character driven, that have heart, you know, and this is why we wanted this movie first, because we both, and what's so funny is when we first started talking about this, we almost simultaneously said, you know, Edinburgh Falcon. Yeah, let's do it. So, there wasn't no there wasn't no debate. There wasn't no argument about it. It was like, yeah, that's the one.
The only question was what's second. Yeah,
exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of technical things to talk about in the movie because, you know, because it's so simplistic, but it's so simplistic in the best kind of way.
Yeah,
you know, there's not any like you know, like spectacular camera angles. There's not any spectacular.
It's just
chase scene.
Yeah, the cinematography is just very tasteful.
Yeah,
the music's tasteful in it. Music's good.
I really like the music.
It's just really just a well done all around movie. It just really, the settings, the scenery, I mean, it's all believable. You know, I mean, the nursing home looks like a real nursing home. You know, it doesn't look like, you know, looks like a real place. You know, all the fishing stuff looks real. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not Hollywooded up. I mean, everything looks, you know, and when they get to the wrestling school, look, I've been to some of these. There's some wrestling schools in Arkansas that look very similar. Okay. So, I mean, they didn't, that's real to life right there. Okay. So, all that was just very, you know, it wasn't overboard. It wasn't, you know, the story is the star for sure. Like
and like I said, you know, a danger of a movie like this is it's very heartfelt, but you don't want to cross that line into being cheesy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's a very dangerous thing that happens in Hollywood where we're like, oh, we have a movie that we can get people by the heart. So let's take it to the nth degree to where it's like it ruins the message, where you're just like, oh, this is over the top. You know, this is not realistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's you know, there's disagreements. There's, you know, little, you know, relationships between Tyler and Zach where they kind of don't agree. You know, it's we joke about how, you know, the one of the funniest scenes in there is when he tells them the rules. Remember, what's the rules? If we're going to be together on this journey, what's the rules? You know, rule number one is, you know, basically you're going to carry your own weight, and rule number two is you're going to listen to everything I say. And then when
don't slow me down.
Yeah, you don't slow me down. 2 minutes later, he kind of reviews. He's like, Zach, what's rule number one? What's Zach say?
Party.
And it's like, oh my gosh, here we go, you know?
Yeah.
So there's those little relationships where you're like, you know, to me, I relate some of those moments almost to like those little small moments in like a Stand By Me kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where there's those little conversations you have when you're on like little trips like that, you know, whether it be in a car or being on foot, and there's all these little moments, but it's like you said, it goes from Tyler being this protector to Zach just softening Tyler and basically almost helping Tyler. He heals Tyler because Tyler needs to be healed in this movie because of the death of his brother. He needs that healing. And there's that scene in the movie. This is not a spoiler alert, but there's the scene in the movie because, you know, Zach talks about through the entire movie his birthday. And there's that scene in the movie where he's like, you know, Tyler, I give you my birthday wish. And it's like one of those moments where you're like, oh, geez, that's such a simple line, but it wraps up the entire movie. It wraps up Zach's heart. It wraps up the heart of the movie right there. I give you my birthday wish.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that almost could have been like the, you know, the little subtitle on the poster. I give you my birthday wish. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I mean, I highly recommend this movie to anybody. You know, there's, you know, I wouldn't say it's not G-rated necessarily, but it's not, you know, over the top anything else that you know, it's very, very much, you know, 10 and above, family friendly kind of thing. You know what I mean?
There's no, just a little bit of language, not much. But no sexual or drugs. A little bit of alcohol, but not much. I mean, it's very, you know, being a pastor, those are things I look for, and it's a very clean movie.
Because really the only time you ever hear any cursing is when Tyler is mad about how Zach tells him how he's been treated in the past.
Yeah, that's
when Tyler kind of says, you know, starts to use cuss words referring to Zach's teachers and coaches and different ones, a way of treating him, his family. And you could see that, you know, where there's that, you know, that protector coming out in Tyler, you know, and like I said, he, you know, they're all three on emotional journeys.
Yeah.
You know, for different reasons, you know, so it's just, it's, I guarantee it's one of those that reads good on the page, and it comes out good on the screen. And it's one of those that has staying power. You know, it's one of those that if it'll come on TV, you know, 20 years from now, and if I see it, I'll sit and watch it. You know, it's never going to get wore out, because it's just a story, you know?
Yeah.
So, but.
Well, folks, if we haven't convinced you yet, I don't know what else we could do.
Right.
Give it a try. Go watch it. Yeah. If you don't like it, and then let us know what you think in the comment section on YouTube or anywhere else you're getting this on any of the other podcast areas. You know, leave it in the comments what you thought of it. What, you know, do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us?
Or do you have any suggestions for movies that are kind of along the same lines? You know, because we've got ideas of movies that we want to talk about that are kind of what we talked about, kind of flown under the radar, more simple, more independent style, more character driven with heart. But if there's something else that you say, hey, you know, what about this movie? Send it our way, man.
That's right. Because we're always looking for good ones to watch.
Yeah, always looking for good ones to watch. So, you know, the Movie Potluck podcast, man. So, I mean, it's just, you know, everything's, you know, everything that we're going to review is going to be movies with a message, movies that have heart, and movies that are original, and movies that don't try to cover up a story with explosions, car chases, gunfights, and things like that. You know, it's movies that are really about the characters and their relationships. So that's what we're looking for, and that's what you're going to see from here in the future. So
like and share. Let people know about this podcast if you enjoyed this and our breakdown of this movie. We're going to have some more. Sometimes, you know, who knows what we'll do.
Right.
It's a potluck. You never know what you're going to get in that dish.
Yeah, well, you know, we may show up with just some good old fashioned deviled eggs.
That's right.
But we may also show up with some kind of casserole, like I said, that you don't know what's in the casserole, but you know it tastes good, and the ingredients in that casserole may die with me.
But I promise,
right?
You have this promise. We're not going to stop by the Dollar General and just get a sleeve of cookies and put them out on the table.
Exactly.
We'll have something better than that for you.
We're not going to be the ones that bring the paper plates and the paper towels.
we're not going to be that guy.
Yeah, we're not going to be that guy. So
well, close us out, Joey.
Oh man, wrapping it up. Did you have a good time?
Sure, man. I did.
Yeah, we had a good time. Hey, movies are supposed to be about fun.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Movies are supposed to be about message. You know, art is about messages. You know, this is, you know, some movies will go into more detail about some things because there might be more, technical things, as far as, the stuff like that. But, right now, I mean, this is going to be a wrap, man.
All right.
Let's wrap it up. We'll see.
Thank y'all so much for listening, watching, like, share, comment. Let us know what you think.
Potluck Podcast.
The Movie Potluck Podcast.
The preceding podcast is the sole property of Bear Meats World Media Group, LLC. Any copying, distribution, or use of its imagery or audio without express written consent is strictly prohibited by law.